Welcome to the city of Miramar's Business Connect, where we connect your business to what's important. Today, we will be discussing uh, how to make your business foundationally sound, even through the pandemic that we're going through now. Is your business ready? And we have our guest panelists today with us. We have attorney and counselor at law, Mr. Thomas Sadler.
Hey, Johnny, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? Tom, starting a business or even weathering this post pandemic with businesses, um, it can be a little bit frustrating and challenging. And making the right decisions is especially important these days. If you're starting a business, you want to know what kind of business, what kind of audience you want to target. You want to know the right suppliers to come in contact with. You may want to know what business entities that you use that best fit your business, and applying the taxes, the appropriate taxes for your base, for your business. And even when you're going through the post pandemic, what are my obligations for my employees? What are my obligations for myself and for my other business partners? All of those questions can come and play a great part in how we conduct businesses. And I think most business owners, Tom, place that on their to-do list, the least important thing, which is actually the most important thing, is legal documentation. Would you be correct on that? Would I be correct on that?
Yeah, Johnny, I think and thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I know, I think you're exactly right that right now we're facing some really challenging times for business owners. And certainly the business environment is shifting every day. It certainly is presenting a lot of challenges to a lot of people. I mean, certainly there's a lot of people that are, trying to keep their business up and running, trying to keep their employees paid, trying to keep the rent paid, trying to keep up with the bills and all of the things that you normally have to deal with the business. But then when we have the pandemic with various closures and various business requirements and various regulations that you have to deal with, it's just extraordinarily difficult, and there's extraordinary challenges. And then you have the other side of the equation, which is certain people that are in difficult situations with their jobs that may consider leaving their job and trying to start a business in this environment as well. And then there's still other folks that are in a business and maybe looking to partner with other businesses, or are looking for ways to sort of find those economies of scale where they might try to combine their business, or look for partnership opportunities, or look for ways to restructure in order to respond to some of the challenges they have out there right now.
Exactly, Tom. I've run into a couple of business owners where I've talked to, and they're in one business that is not, um, may not, their projection of their business is not going to survive this post pandemic. And they're now rethinking what should they do next. And some of them are planning and anticipating opening other businesses, which is why I would love to have you on the show if people are going to do that, and what we call in our era today, reinvent yourself.
Right.
What are the proper things to do for your business? And if you are surviving, how can you survive with your businesses and stay foundationally sound with your business, even through the pandemic? And I think you're the right person to bring about certain documentation that we may need, and some oversights that business owners have a tendency to overlook. Important documents. I've heard you speak on many occasions, and it's you have a wealth of information for businesses to survive a pandemic, or to even restart a business in a pandemic.
Well, and those are great points as well, Johnny, because it's one of those things that I think a lot of times when people are in the first blush of starting a business, probably the last thing you're thinking about are kind of the details, or it's left till the end, and that's something we'll catch up on. But it's very good to start with your foundation and get that stuff together at the beginning. And for all we're talking about the pandemic and the challenges that we have out there, some of what we have is an opportunity as well, because it might give you a chance to sit down and really focus on that business plan and focus on those things that you need. So maybe you can check off a few of those boxes that you might not have done before, but go back and look at your business and say, do I have these certain documents? Do I have these certain structures? Have I thought about these sort of elements of my business, and whether they're in the proper place.
Exactly. Exactly, Tom. So I'm ready, and I know our listening audience and our viewing audience is ready for you to share this valuable and important information that will help businesses survive through the pandemic as they reopen, and others to help them and guide them in a possibility of reopening and restarting another business.
So, Johnny, what I've done is I've pulled together a PowerPoint presentation and I've tried to touch on some of these points as far as some of the challenges that people might be facing, and some of the ways that they might address them. Our
Okay.
employees, how we're dealing with our contracts, how we're dealing with partnerships, or maybe how we're dealing with a startup situation if we're going from, an employment situation into a situation where, I'm going to take that leap and start the business now that I'm facing these challenges, or what have you. Maybe it is the time that somebody goes out and says, hey, I'm going to start that business and make that happen. So, all right, fantastic. And just the requisite disclaimer, I just want anybody in the audience to know that basically what we're offering here today is not legal advice as such. We're throwing out these points for kind of general information. So as far as applying that to the specific circumstances of what anybody might be facing, certainly we suggest that they consult legal professionals, reach out to an attorney or their financial or tax advisors. So any of what we're presenting here today, don't take that as specific legal advice for your situation to sort of run out, and it doesn't create an attorney-client relationship with Sadler Law or myself as an attorney. All right, if you just want to jump to the next slide there. So the business survival during a pandemic. I mean, right now we're just, as we discussed, we're facing these extraordinary circumstances, and certainly they're never before circumstances. I mean, certain businesses are shutting down in ways that they never have been shut down before, and of course that's creating extraordinary circumstances for people to try to keep the doors open, to try to keep the customers in, to try to keep in contact with the customers. So that's something that you're continually dealing with on an extended basis. And I guess now we're going into the fifth or sixth month of this pandemic with, shutdowns and opens up and different trips to the hospital and hospitalizations, and even people that are, facing the ultimate fatalities and trips to the hospital and losing family members. So it's really a very difficult time for a lot of folks there. So that's kind of the environment that we're in, and certainly the small businesses are really taking it on the chin because they don't have the deep pockets, and they don't have the huge resources available to them that maybe a larger business organization would. So they've got to be very fast on their feet and looking for every opportunity. So you can switch to the next slide there. So this presentation trying to deal with the various business obligations and the contracts and the things that come up, and trying to plan your business. So the limits of this presentation is, of course, I'm a Florida licensed attorney, so I only do business in Florida, and I'm only sort of able to advise on what's happening in Florida. I mean, certainly the general topics we'll talk about are applicable to sort of general business across the board. But you do need to know that there are specific circumstances that you may have related to, your employment contracts, your residential or commercial leases, or your real estate contracts or your insurance contracts, and some of those will be driven by the jurisdiction that you're in. Certainly if you're in Florida, Florida law would apply, but some people run businesses that are, go across state lines, or you may be in another state picking up this podcast. So, certainly that'll apply, and you do need to make sure that you're getting the sort of right legal advice for the place where you are. What we're not really going to address so much is specific lawsuits that may involve employees or customers who have claimed to have gotten sick because they were in your business or at your location.
Right.
Will have to be a topic for another day or another time. And certainly the regulatory requirements and some of those things, that's going to go beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. The applications for federal and state relief programs, which certainly are things that your listeners are going to want to be looking out for, but that goes a little bit beyond the scope of what we'll talk about today. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. So your business survival strategy, first off, don't give up. Don't get stressed out, so stressed out that you're to the point where you can't make a decision, or you're over analyzing everything, or you're just so overwhelmed by it that it's almost you're sticking your head in the sand and just hoping it all goes away and waiting for something to change. I mean, the fact of the matter is you need to stay calm. You need to assess the situation, and you need to work on developing that plan. And when I say developing a plan, it doesn't need to be three loose leaf binders and loose leaf tabs and all sorts of supporting materials. What I'm talking about with a plan is just trying to sit down with a sheet of paper and address those things that are most important now. Get something down on a piece of paper and come up with a strategy to move forward. Part of that plan, you're going to want to find those resources that are out there that are readily available. You're going to want to communicate with those people that you're dealing with. You're going to want to keep your employees in the loop, customers, your suppliers, and you're going to want to be in touch with those professionals who support you, like your accountants and your lawyers and the folks out there who you rely on to keep your business going. And as I've mentioned, for as much as we talk about the downside of a pandemic, there are opportunities that are going to present that may very well put your business in a very different, take you in a different direction that you never thought of before, and quite frankly, may open up opportunities that weren't there before. So, use that time that you have available now to sort of get those things done that you may not have had time to do before. So, you can jump to the next slide. So you're really in a crisis planning, and as a crisis, you're going to want to not get too stressed out about it, but at the same time, action is going to be important. You're going to need that action and that crisis strategy plan. And again, focus on having a short plan. If you can keep it to one page, try to keep it to one page. Hit those bullet points, put down a plan, and start acting on it. So the first priority I'd suggest for most business owners are folks in business trying to keep a business open is, it's going to be paying the bills. The first thing that comes to mind is the lease or the rent. What are your options for being able to deal with your lease and your rent, and being able to keep the lights on and the doors open and the roof overhead there? For as challenging as it is, you do have, again, those opportunities. I mean, everybody's in this situation together. Nobody's avoiding it, from the biggest company down to the smallest company. They're all facing the issue of, can we pay the rent this month? And landlords are facing that as well. So it does present that opportunity to, if you have issues, if you're having a challenge, you want to communicate with the person that's providing your lease, with your landlord. You want to talk to them and see what you're able to do and see what they're able to do for you. Perhaps it's renegotiating a lease. Perhaps it's putting off some payments, because quite frankly, for a lot of landlords, they're going to want to keep a store up and running in their property. They're not going to necessarily want to lose you, because there's not a lot of people behind you that are looking to move into that store right now. So there's the opportunity to, rather than just not paying the rent or not paying the lease, or ignoring it, reach out to your landlord and see what you're able to do there, and start that communication going early. The other people you want to reach out to, certainly your employees. They're going to be worried. They're going to be concerned about what's happening. And, sometimes as an employer, you're going to have difficult decisions to make, but, better to make those decisions sooner and to communicate those decisions to your employees, rather than trying to avoid them. Your suppliers, same thing. You want to hear from them as far as, are they able to provide the goods and the services that you need to keep your business going? And are we going to be able to pay for it? Are you going to be able to sell it on the other side? So having those lines of communications open are going to be important. And of course, your creditors and investors are going to want to know where you are with your business. So, very important, again, using that time that you might have now to start those discussions going and get out in front of that. Great thing to think about with your plan is, what is essential to your business? What needs to be done now? What do you need to do to stay open, today, tomorrow, and beyond the pandemic? So,
Quick
yes, sir.
question for you. What if there's a business with a joint venture partnership? How does that look when, say, one of the entities in that contractual agreement says, I'm ready to throw in the towel. I don't want to do this anymore. And one is trying to make heads or tails of this and keep this business going. How does that look from a legal aspect?
And if I could leave that for just a little later, I do address
Okay, you
that
have, okay, all
on another
right.
slide coming
I'm
up. But
jumping
that,
ahead.
but that's a great question. That's one of those things I really do want to touch on because it's one of the
Okay,
things that businesses really run into most often when you have multiple partners out there.
okay,
As far as they may have very different ideas of what they want to do. So let me just wrap up this card, and we'll go to that on
okay,
one more
perfect.
slide. But your next thing in your crisis plan you want to really look at is that budget. Again, what
Ah,
your budget looks like, what do your cash flows look like, what kind of money do you have coming in, and doing those projected pro forma income sheets, your cash flows, your balance sheet. You really want to have those tight and know what's happening there, and
mm,
really focus on those changes in revenue and those changes that you're gonna need to implement to reduce those costs, and what your payment priorities are going to be. Like, what do you need to absolutely pay in full? What do you need to pay partially? What can you work out with your creditors as far as maybe I can pay this a little bit later, or maybe we can pay a portion of it. And again, having those discussions with your
yeah.
suppliers, with your employees, with the folks who you deal with every day is important. Next slide, Jen. So the other flip side of that is going to be financing, and there's trying to keep the doors open. Obviously, a lot of times can be
All right,
dependent on having money come in, and what can help you through it is if your income is down a little bit, certainly having a source of finance can be a lifeline. And I know a lot of the government agencies, whether it's local agencies and local organizations like City of Miramar, or the state of Florida, or Broward County, are the federal government through the SBA and some of the programs that are out there. It's worth right now getting online, Googling a lot of that, and trying to figure out what the business assistance out there that you qualify for. The SBA has its economic injury disaster loan program. There are debt relief programs. There are bridge loans. There are minority and disadvantaged business assistance programs. The PPP program that's out there, the Paycheck Protection Program.
right.
There's a lot of resources right now, and those resources are moving pretty fast. So, having your finances together, having your having your business records, having your accounting and bookkeeping up to date is all very important for being able to move on some of those programs and being able to take advantage of those programs so that you might be able to access some of that financing that'll bridge you over these difficult times, keep your doors open, and help you move in the direction you need to move into. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
Tom, also, Tom, it is very important, I guess, for businesses to make sure that all their that all their documentations for their business is available for these funding. I find a lot of the small businesses that I go to, they don't have all the information they need, all the paperwork they need to even apply for SBA loans and for debt relief and for minority and disadvantaged programs that they have available for them, because they don't have the paperwork in order. I think it's very important to make sure that they have that paperwork in order, so when it's time to file for those things and go after those grants, they are readily prepared for.
and Johnny, I really can't stress that enough because that's one of those things that being able to go after these programs, a lot of them are moving pretty fast, and the money's available when the money's available. And
Mhm.
if you're not in a position to jump on that and send the paperwork out that needs to be sent out, you're going to be at a real disadvantage, and you may miss
Yes.
some opportunities. So again, I've stressed this, the communication. That's probably the most important thing that you're really going to have to do is, you can't ignore these problems. You can't just wait until everything winds down, or you can't wait till a solution comes its way. Being proactive, taking action, getting that plan in place, and then starting to execute on it is essential. And communicating that plan to your customers, to your employees, to your suppliers, to your creditors and lenders, that's all going to be essential to making a lot of the to getting through and bridging through this pandemic, um, and keeping the lines of communication open too, because a lot of what's happening is we're not necessarily in the office, we're not meeting with people, we're not necessarily doing things the way we used to do it. So you're going to be looking for new ways to communicate. I know just today we had a little challenge getting up and running because we have this new Zoom thing and the WebEx and the different databases or the different
Right.
the different communications, and it's not all telephone anymore, and it's not meeting with people. A lot of it's using Zoom or WebEx or some of the new platforms that are out there. So
Mhm.
and also not really being able to meet face to face so easily these days. So it's important that we make sure that we are in touch with those people, and that we're communicating with them regularly, and that we're anticipating the problems, and seeking the solutions, and having the open lines of communication there.
Right.
So, you want to hit the next slide? So again, I mentioned that looking for the opportunities, to throw out an overused quote from Winston Churchill: "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And certainly this can be a good time to really review and revise that business model. Maybe there were some things you wanted to do, and when business is running fast, and you've got a lot of things coming in the door and a lot of things going on, it's tough to review and revise your business model. But now maybe you have a little bit of time to think through that, and see if there's some new business you can go after, or look for some new opportunities that are out there. One of the things that's happening with a lot of businesses is suddenly they're looking at, I've got big office space. Do I need all of this office space? Can I go to a more virtual office structure? Can I use a work at home structure? How
Mhm.
much of how much of that am I going to really need going forward? And how much can we do from a more lean and sort of stripped down kind of structure for our office? Um, Another thing is evaluation of your competition. Your competitors are facing the exact same challenge as you are. A lot of businesses are not going to make it through this, and that may, unfortunately for them, but for your business, that may open up some opportunities. That may open up some access to some customers that you may not have been able to touch before. So
Yeah.
that's something to really be looking out for, and being that lean business that's able to go out there after some new opportunities. And certainly the new products and the services and the new needs
Yeah.
that need to be met in this new environment. So, um, looking towards our next slide there. Okay, so starting a business. So some folks will find themselves in a completely startup situation, where maybe you've worked for a company for a number of years, and maybe you were thinking of going out on your own, but didn't really do it because the job was there and you were working and things were going along
Mhm.
okay. But I think some people, Johnny, are going to find themselves in circumstances where the business just didn't make it. The business that they were working for as an employee just wasn't making it. And now maybe they want to take a stab at, this is the time that I'm going to go out and try to start that business, and try to move in the direction of, working for myself, and
Mhm.
trying to work in the direction of fulfilling that dream. And there's a number of things that obviously it's a little bit too big for this one session to get into exactly what it takes to get into business, and to start a business. But some of the things that you're going to be looking for when you start a business is, what's your structure going to be? How's your business going to be structured? Are you going to be a corporation? Are you going to be an LLC? How are your taxes going to be handled? What kind of tax structure are you going to have? Are you going to be a corporation? Are you going to be a subchapter S corporation? How are the taxes going to pass through to your personal return? So there's a lot of things that you need to work out there. A lot of it's on the accounting side, so you need to be looking towards who's going to be advising you on the accounting. But you also need to look at the legal structure of your business too, as far as what's your business look like from a legal perspective? What's your liability? How are you going to
Yes.
manage liability? Those are the sort of things that sometimes folks may not look as closely at when they first start out, but they can become big problems if you haven't given some thought to that. Um, Johnny, you threw out the idea of partners and joint
Right.
ventures, and working with other people. That can be a very big challenge, and it's the civil equivalent of getting married. So you're really it's you're working with this person.
Right.
You're getting very engaged in finances together, and a lot of times you have to be on the same page with that with those partners, and understand exactly what everybody expects out of the business, and that can be a real challenge. And now take that back to the two slides, to the communication, that having that communication, having that understanding with all of the partners that are involved is important. And one of the things that I think 98% of your businesses out there give short shrift to is, with our partnership, are we putting anything down on paper?
Wow.
If we don't have anything down on paper, how do we really know that we've done the right thing, that we're going in the right direction, that we've all kind of agreed on where we're going with this? Um, Ownership structure, who owns what? A lot of times businesses start out and one person has some of the finances, and another person has the expertise, and still another person is a straight up investor. And how do you resolve all of those structures, and how do you make sure all of that's working together? And depending on the business structure that you take, your business organization and what kind of documents you want to have there is going to be very different. Some businesses will choose to go without it, or maybe they won't even choose. They'll just ignore it and not really think too much about it. And if you do that, it's not the end of the world, but it isn't the best way to go about it. What you end up then is, if you say you start an LLC sort of corporation, and you file the documents, but you don't really have a business plan put together, there's a default in the law that will basically control how your business operates if there's a dispute, if you need to close the business, how that business is going to be wrapped up, or how that business is going to address certain things, is going to be controlled by statute, rather than being controlled by maybe documents that you drafted that fit your specific purpose a little bit better. So those are some of the things that you want to think about when you're starting a business, and how you're structuring that business. Um, just a simple question of ownership. How much of your business do you own? Do you own 10%? Do you own 20%? Do you own 100%? How do you prove that you own that business? All of these sort of things that come up that, may seem like obvious questions, but a lot of times are a lot more complicated once you start digging down into them. And again, a lot of times they're the crossing the T's and dotting the I's sort of thing, that when we're starting up a business, we don't necessarily focus on that as much, because we're in the heat of the moment. We're trying to get the product out the door, or trying to get the food on the table, or trying to get the door open to the restaurant every day, but not necessarily thinking about some of these other details that are very important. So our next slide is some of the challenges when you're actually starting and then running that business during the pandemic. What are your obligations? What do you have to do as far as meeting obligations to other people? You're going to have certain contracts which are going to give you contractual obligations to do certain things, and those contracts are going to you're going to run into disputes during those contracts on occasion. We already discussed some of what's happening with your rental, with your lease, with your landlord. What's happening with that. How is that being changed? And are you calling him, and your landlord's giving you the saying, okay, yeah, it's fine to miss a couple weeks or a couple months of rent, but do you have that in writing? Is that how long are you going to be able to? Are you going to have an eviction that might be facing you after the pandemic? Those are the sort of things that you want to give some thought to, and you want to really be communicating. Taxes, how are your taxes being paid? Are they being paid during the pandemic? Paying your suppliers, receiving payments from customers, slow payments. So the flip side of the obligations that you have, others have obligations to you. Are you requiring that people still pay on with a 10-day turnaround? Are you letting some of those receivables slip for a few months, or a few weeks? Or what's going to be the plan for doing that, and what's going to be your what's going to be your security, as far as if you have said to your customers, yeah, it's fine if I've done this service and you can pay me a little bit later, but when is later going to be? And at what point do you start getting more aggressive with your collections? Those sort of things that are a big challenge right now during a pandemic. So and the resolution of disputes. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have, is trying to resolve these disputes, and trying to do it in a friendly way. And certainly we can actually, if you can move to the next slide there, Jen. Thanks. So one of the things that I encourage my clients is, we need to think in practical terms. I mean, certainly in any circumstance, thinking in practical terms is important. And there's a lot of folks who get very lawsuit happy, and they want to sue, or they want to, they're going to enforce their rights, and they get very aggressive about it. But certainly, even in the best of circumstances, lawsuits can be challenging. As far as if you're getting sued by somebody, if you're turning around to sue somebody, certainly legal services and charges can be expensive. So thinking in practical terms about resolving those conflicts, how much money can you save by going into mediation, or even before you get to mediation, by just again, going back to that communication, going back to that trust relationship that you have with somebody. You can save a lot of time, money, effort, and heartache, and preserve your business relationships for after the pandemic by being reasonable, by anticipating the problems, and then reaching out to people, and trying to work through those problems without getting too overly aggressive. And the other thing to understand is that, again, you're in a pandemic environment. So if somebody owes you money, they may simply not have it, and that may be just the circumstance. And it's the sort of blood through from a stone sort of position that you may find yourself in. So no matter how much litigation you do, sometimes it may be difficult to get any kind of resolution to it beyond an agreement to try to do the right thing as we move through this. So you can move to the next one there, John. So just we certainly always suggest the dispute resolution, and before if you're not able to if you're not able to if you're not able to resolve it in an amicable fashion at first with you know with just talking it out, maybe you look towards arbitration, or maybe you look towards mediation and trying to bring in a third party that would really sit down and try to help you find a common ground and move beyond that. Of course, doing this sort of thing in a pandemic can be a real challenge, but these are the sort of things that you may want to look to before jumping into the legal action to enforce a contract, or before somebody throws a legal action at you. So you can move to the next slide there. Thanks. So initially, though, you do want to work to make sure you're preserving your rights in obviously any dispute. You want to make sure that you've gathered your contracts and you've assessed the obligations that you have out there. You do want to notify your customers. You do want to keep your employees updated. And a lot of times just having that information out there and letting folks know if you're facing challenges, are communicating to folks the other way that trying to figure out whether they're having challenges meeting their obligations to you. Again, it's that communications that is really invaluable as far as trying to work through this before bringing in third parties, before getting in court, before getting pulled into litigation. So jump to the next slide there, please. So documents to review and the sort of things that you're going to be looking at. Certainly there's a lot of leases that you're going to have. There's riders that are going to be there. There's all sorts of documents that you're coming into contact with all the time, and having those documents in order and having all of that available is going to be essential for protecting your rights and for kind of keeping your business on an even keel. What are the termination of rights? What are your cancellations? How do those things really affect your business? And there's even, a lot of the more complicated contracts that you'll get into are your insurance policies. Do you have one thing to think about in a pandemic is, if you're taking losses or if you're losing things or if the pandemic's had an adverse effect on your business, is it covered by an insurance policy that you might have out there, some kind of business protection? And if you don't have that business protection, is that something you're going to want to look towards in the future? So, some of the contracts you might have, like in your lease, you may have a force majeure cause or an act of God cause that, maybe if we have a pandemic and your business is shut down, well, maybe that gives you the option for getting out of a lease. Maybe that allows you to move away from that or to renegotiate something with your landlord. These are the sort of things that you may want to be looking at for, a little bit of relief out there, or a way to kind of negotiate through some of the challenges you might be facing. So we can move to the next slide there, John. All right, so and again, focusing on the possible and the practical, you really want to look at those practical resolutions and what can you get done now. I mean, certainly the pandemic puts us in a situation where we have the opportunity to negotiate, and again, everybody's facing the same circumstance. So, folks that might not have been willing to negotiate in the past may be willing to come to the table and negotiate or modify an agreement, or look in a different direction of where you might go with that relationship or how you might modify that agreement. So again, looking for those opportunities that are out there and focusing on the possible and the practical as opposed to how we'd like it to be. Dealing with the way it is now and working beyond that. So you hit the next slide there, please.
So Tom, before I go to the next slide, so when you are focusing on the possibilities of the practicalities of lease agreements, and you're talking about negotiations and talking it through with the landlord, could one of those possibilities be as if the landlord has a smaller square foot space that is less than cost per month? That could be negotiated as far as the negotiation you're talking about. Could that be part of that
Of course,
conversation?
sure. Trying to move in that direction, or trying to move towards getting that getting a different lease, or getting a different lease structure, or maybe just
Right,
having paying less for the space that you have. I
right,
mean, right now landlords are facing the difficulty of their, as far as residential leases, for folks that are in the residential leasing. Right now you can't do an eviction. There's a moratorium on evictions through the end of through the end of this month, and that's been in place for the better part of 3 or 4 months now. That faces difficult challenges for the landlord, who
yes,
relies on the money coming in to pay the taxes and to pay the different bills that he has there. But at the same time, folks who have lost their jobs and can't afford to pay rent, it pays to really try to come to a meeting of the mind between those two,
right,
the landlord who needs to have his rent paid, and the employee, or the tenant who needs to needs that space, and needs it to recover and move forward. I mean, those are the things that, again, that communication and talking back and forth and trying to work towards some
right,
resolution is so planning your negotiation strategy, again, reviewing the contract and knowing what's out there, and then having the prior communications about the contract with, whether it's the supplier, whether it's the landlord, whether it's the even, your insurance company, or a claim that you might need to file. Having all the paperwork, having that contract in front of you and understanding it is essential. And then figuring out what your counterparty's perspective is. If you're a landlord, you're worried about getting the rent. If you're a tenant, you're worried about being able to stay in there, or whether you can pay the rent, or what that rent's going to look like if you can't pay for 2 or 3 months. Are you going to get kicked out of there? That's the challenge that you have. And again, going back to that communication and setting up that negotiation strategy so that you can get the best possible outcome that keeps your business moving in the right direction. You can hit the next slide, please. And so other things to consider, certainly the insurance, I mentioned that a little bit. We touched on it. Do you have insurance that might cover some of the losses that you have out there? Some of the policies do have a business provision in there for, if you do hit a bump in the road. So you may want to look at that. You may want to talk to your insurance agent about, do you have a possible claim, or something that might help you to bridge the gap there. And again, these folks are people that are going to want to work with you, because the pandemic will eventually end and it will be over. And the goodwill that you build up now is definitely something that's going to pay dividends in the future. We touched on a little bit the new contracts. Can you renegotiate some of the contracts that you might have, or some of the agreements you might have with your suppliers, with your customers? You may be able to come up with some new structures, or some better ways to work that relationship. And the news and updates. I mean, staying on top of the regulations you have. I mean,
hmm,
certainly, the new regulatory structures that are out there, and the new rules that you have in this pandemic environment. I think just it's got to be overwhelming for the restaurant owner, or the person that owns a business where people are coming into. Just your point of sale and your point of contact, having to put up screens in front of all of your cash registers, or enforcing whether people are wearing masks, and making sure your employees are protected, and having that PPE gear is essential. And a lot of times there's regulatory concerns as well, that you have new health inspections and new codes that you have to comply with. So all of it is very essential that you be on top of that, and really be on the internet, and checking in with the various regulatory bodies. And you hit the next slide. So, and that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, I tried to throw some additional resources up there as far as what might be out there. I mean, certainly the city of Miramar has a number of resources through your office there, Johnie.
yes, we
Certainly
do.
your Chamber of Commerce's can be a wonderful source of information, and source of guidance. The U.S. Small Business Administration, the state of Florida, your local government agencies, your county agencies, they're all there to they're all looking to help, and they're all looking to keep your business and keep you moving in the right direction, and keep your help you to keep your head above water in these challenging times.
Well, Tom, we thank you so much, because you have just poured out a lot of important and valuable information for business owners who are struggling with reopening the panic and this pandemic that we're suffering through, and others who have decided, you know what, it's a great opportunity for me to now start my own business. You've given us a lot of information that is going to be very helpful for them to start their new venture in whatever rate it goes. Um, it's inevitable. Every business is not going to make it out of this. We know that. It's sad to say it, but reality sets in. Every business is not going to make it. That doesn't mean that they give up. It means it's time to put our bootstraps on, reinvent ourselves, think about what we can do, think about what things are available to us, all those resources. It's like you said before, stay informed of what's going on around you. Also making sure that you're taking notes to you're talking it over with your landlord, you're talking it over with your creditors, making sure that you're making a communication with them and keeping an open communication with them to make sure that you can negotiate things that can keep you running for as long as you can. Those are great opportunities for business to take advantage of. And I'd like to say today that there's hope even in a pandemic. And what you're saying is that you have to communicate. You have to stay on. You have to stay on top of things. But most important, don't give up. Don't be so quick. Don't be so quick to give up. So we thank you for that, Tom.
I appreciate the time, Johnny, and great to be here with you today.
No problem at all. Glad to have you here. On another note, for all our business owners out there, the the 2020 census is out there. Make time to have your employees complete the census. The census results are very, very important. What they do for us, it's hundreds and billions of dollars that are federal funding that comes into these can come into your communities. And the results of your census controls how you operate your highways being built, construction work going on, subways, transit systems. It also provides means for other businesses and for other organizations such as child abuse and housing for elderly. It also helps with restoring wildlife. It helps in every aspect of your community. And understand as business owners that if your community thrives, so will your business. So again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Johnny Douglas. I'm your host, and we want you to stay connected.
Thanks, Johnny.